Hi, it's Maria, and I'm doing another Maria Unfiltered, and this is in my Life Exposed in the Forgiveness to Love series. And today we're doing this is going to be 23B because I did 23A before, and I ended it so that we could have another one, so that one wasn't too long. So I have two shorter ones. So this is 23B, and the title is it's in the page 6 of my forgiveness list. But the title of this one is Who Won, Johnny Depp or Mr. Chicago? And so you'll find this pretty funny. Anyway, I'm telling you some more juicy tidbits, to add to my last video where I told you quite a bit about the injustice and all the machinations going on behind the scenes in my defamation trial. And so where the ex who liked to actually call himself Mr. Chicago, and he was actually written up in a newspaper article or magazine article or something where he had told the reporter that that's how he wanted to be referred to. Anyway, it was kind of funny, actually. And so, but you'll see that actually he beat out Johnny Depp in having the largest judgment. However, on the flip side of that, you have to remember, I was the one that was ordered to pay the largest amount of money in history to an ex who was self-proclaimed. Well, anyway, whether or not he was self-proclaimed or not, I was the one that was ordered to pay out more money than anyone else had ever been ordered to pay. And so I say he was a self-proclaimed defamed because he wasn't defamed at all. And where's the proof? And so there wasn't any proof at all, because the whole thing was just a big joke. It was a big PR stunt, if you want to call it that. And so the ex testified, actually, I'm kind of repeating what I said, but I'm just trying to get you up to speed in case anyone hasn't seen this or remembered it. Anyway, that he testified that because of my letter, he couldn't find work, even selling shoes. And so honestly, he said that in court. That was actual testimony. And so is it any wonder that my children refused to speak to me? They were so angry and so embarrassed. And these are children. And so they believed whatever they were told. And so what they were told is that everything was their mother's fault, and that their father couldn't work and couldn't have a job, and so they would starve, and they'd lose their home, and they couldn't even buy their own shoes. And so I told you the whole the reality of what went on is that he had retired because he had a golden parachute of I was told, about $5 million. And so it was just so ridiculous. And it was actually insulting to anyone's intelligence who heard that. And so that part of it was kind of hushed up. That didn't get into the papers. But anyone thinking that their mom did this to their dad who supports them. I mean, what are we teaching our children, and why are we frightening them and trying to alienate them? It's the children were worried about their home downsizing or losing their home or what they could no longer buy. And so they weren't thinking of how crazy, the whole thing was, or how he had acted when we were all living together. They were just thinking about themselves. I mean, they're children and they're focused on themselves and their needs. And they don't really need to become embroiled in the drama of two parents who are in this adversarial situation called divorce, and so the purpose of these videos really is to shed light on what actually goes on between two parents and the family, the destruction to not only the family, but to the whole structure of the family structure, because it not only affects the parents and the children, but it really affects the schools, and it affects the relatives, and it affects everything in life, really, because family is the foundation of everything that we have in in our life on planet Earth. It's all relationships, and family is really the relationships within the family are really the most important relationships we have. Oops. And so, excuse me. Anyway, so for years, I had been dealing with all of this incessant BS. But I did mention in the last video that I so appreciated the people in my social circle because they, along with my children, were what gave me things to look forward to. And so the whole point of these videos really is for us to stand tall and to tell the truth, because so many of us hover and we don't want to even face it, and we certainly don't want to tell anyone about it because we feel so silly that we're actually living in this drama, in this twilight zone in this just this ridiculous situation that needn't be at all. And yet it's just taken to new heights within the legal system once the attorneys become involved. And then it kind of just takes on a life of its own. And so, in our social circles, whatever those social circles might be, we don't talk about private things like that because certainly we don't talk about abuse because we're embarrassed by it. And yet I'm encouraging you to find your strength and to not allow that abuse to go on. And, it's easy in hindsight to say that. And yet when we are in the thick of it, we don't see the forest for the trees, right? And so it's time that we really speak up, because that's about loving ourselves. The bottom line is self-love. And when we can forgive ourselves for allowing ourselves to be put in those situations, or allowing ourselves, I don't know if we're put in those situations or we actually go voluntarily, right? And so we just have to take care of ourselves and extricate ourselves, because we are here to live a fabulous life on planet Earth. We are not here to be anyone's punching bag, and we are not here to be anyone's doormat. We are here to be strong and empowered in who we are as divine beings on this planet Earth. And so certainly no one knows better than we know what goes on behind closed doors. And it's not about sharing dirty laundry or anything. It's really about standing tall and just saying, I'm not going to put up with it, and this is what I have endured, and this is going to stop. And so because when we allow that to happen, many times it escalates. And so we allow ourselves to be put in very dangerous positions. And I know in the last video I talked about how law enforcement and the FBI and other agencies have told me how women disappear. And they're said to be victims of an accident or a suicide or someone other than the real perpetrator is actually then framed in such a situation. And I mentioned, that now the violence on planet Earth is really off the charts. And so I just want to be perfectly clear that the creepos that, were hired to follow me and still are following me generally listen to what I say and they act on it. And so they make it seem like if I say something in a video and then something happens shortly thereafter, they make it seem like, it's what a coincidence. Well, I mentioned about that rampage in my video a couple days ago. And so, it can be that the creepos are really after us. And so they have copycat crimes. And so those are they copycat the publicized crimes. So I'm just letting you all know that when you speak up about it, don't be afraid. And yet just know that when you hear things that are going on in the world, be extra careful, because these things do go on And they may not be random at all. In fact, they can be strategically committed in the midst of the publicity surrounding other acts of violence. And so the bottom line is just to know your truth and to make sure others know your truth too, because we can't depend on anyone else to protect us. We have to protect ourselves, and we can't have 24-hour bodyguards, right? And so we just have to be smart and not be overly concerned, but to be awakened and to be aware of what goes on in this planet. And so the entire theme of the Forgiveness to Love videos is that we must take responsibility for all that happens to us. And we must take responsibility for our own awakening, right? And to be alert of what goes on around us and to pay attention to the red flags, whether, we see them or whether they have been said to us. And there's no more dismissing them, right? And so we are powerful beings, and we are not going to allow our thoughts to even take us into those places, but we are awakened and we are empowered, and we are very, very powerful, right? And so I'll tell you a little story. And I've told you how holidays, certain things happen on holidays. And my ex had told me, if you leave me, I'm going to make sure every holiday is just miserable for you. And so usually something happens on one of my children's birthdays or any other holiday. And so, it's this past weekend was Father's Day, right? And so I went to pour some heated water from a kettle into a French coffee press. And I drank my 2 cups, and then I went to pour the remaining water into a rinsed out coffee mug that I had been drinking out of. And so what poured out were dozens of black specks, with the clear spring water that had actually camouflaged the dark that were actually camouflaged in the dark brown liquid. And I thought, ew, those are toxic chemical specks. And so I thought, oh, they must have come from the coffee pot, from the kettle. And I checked it, and there was nothing in there. It's a stainless coffee kettle, and there was nothing that could have done that. And I thought, oh my God, I ingested all of that, and yet I had no idea. I didn't see it. And then all day long, I had this noticeable chemical taste for hours and hours in my mouth. And so then at that point, I remembered, oh, it's a holiday, right? And it was Father's Day. And the sibling and the ex had always wanted my memory of my father, to be a painful one. The ex, yeah, that's true. That's what they wanted. And so I realized that the house where I was living was empty the night before. And so I thought, oh, I guess they just wanted, to sabotage my morning Father's Day coffee. Anyway, I don't know. But the point is, it's just to be aware. Like, look around, make sure everything is okay, right? And check your food and make sure your doors are locked, and do things like that, because you are a strong being. And so you want to be aware, right? And so anyway, I remembered that the plan was to create as much pain as possible. And so when you're 2 steps ahead, then things go a little more smoothly for everyone, right? Because we're talking about some very sick and sadistic people that are walking around the planet right now. And of course, now, given all the energies out in the collective, some of the rage that they have and all of these repressed emotions are really coming to the surface. And so people are acting in very bizarre ways, right? And so I remembered that, my dad had hoped that the sibling was not as mentally ill as he had feared, since there were so many family discussions regarding the protection of our family fortune. And so the sibling would nod, that she understood we were all working together as a family to protect the maneuvers of the ex, right? The ex-family member who, at the time, no one knew that she was actually working for him. And so And then once he died, I guess she took over. I didn't know for years that he actually had died when he died. But in any event, so what happened was my parents were actually like sheep led to slaughter because they didn't know that there were people within the family that were working against uh, the other people, right? I mean, if a daughter is working against the parents, they wouldn't necessarily even imagine that something like that would go on. And you wouldn't imagine that your own sibling would do that and try to put you out on the street. I mean, that's just so bizarre, right? Because we believe that family, blood is thicker than water. Well, we know better now. But yeah, so in my family, it was all about my parents were concerned about the equitable distribution of their fortune and how whatever measures could be put in place to protect the estate, because that's really what they cared about, right? And so as I go back to the defamation trial, my attorney had told me that when we were first before the trial, right when it was like the first day or something, when the judge had said that he knew the ex's family for over 30 years, my attorney said it was clear that we were going to lose. And so they said, well, we could ask the judge to recuse himself, but then we might get somebody even more in a relationship. So, and you're only allowed to, I guess, have one judge recused. But in any event, in a community, everybody seems to know everybody anyway, right? And so in Chicago, that's certainly the case, I think. And so also when the judge on a Friday afternoon, right before I was to go on the witness stand, the judge said that any contempt ruling would be automatic jail time rather than a fine, because that's how, in many cases, the judge just will fine the person that's held in contempt if you disrupt the proceedings going on. And so my attorney said, well, once he said it was jail time, he said, I knew things did not look good. And so then I told him that I hadn't even thought about this, but as I told him that when he was cross-examining me, a man entered the courtroom and sat in the very last row and stood up and was making these weird, exaggerated arm movements and these faces and stuff like that at me, and sticking out his tongue and waving his arms and jumping around like a clown. And this was in the last row, so nobody but me could see him. And so it was nearly impossible for me to concentrate. But had I said, stop, I can't pay attention to my attorney asking me questions. I can't answer them in a concise and clear manner because of what's going on there. Yeah, that would have been contempt. And so, when I said that, my attorney said, well, I'm just never going to come back to this venue again, because he was from Pennsylvania. But he was a top domestic violence attorney. And so all in all, all the litigation that was filed against me just seemed to be hilariously funny to the ex. And so who knows who he paid to stand there and try to distract me, right? And so there are things that we have to be aware of, and understand that just about anything can happen. I mean, your imagination is the limit of what actually goes on planet Earth. And so just be awake, be aware, and understand that some people will do anything to win. And how many of us have been there and not seen the situation for what it was, because we just can't imagine the level of depravity that is actually going on in the planet, right? And so also in the 2009, the bankruptcy trial in Tampa, where I was drugged, and the ex flew my third son down, my third son, Stephen, and so they sat in the courtroom, and I was drugged, and I was just so bombarded with all these horrible questions that they just really kind of attacked me. And so my third son, got up and ran out of the courtroom. And I couldn't tell if he was angry, if he was crying, anyway, he was visibly upset. And so, um, is that what we really want our kids to see? Do we really want our kids to see one of their parents crucified, or or um, or sacrificed on the witness stand in a courtroom? Do we really want to see to have our children see one of our parents um, who's just been so ostracized? And do we really want our parents to see how low that those perpetrators have actually stooped? I mean, it's shameful. And so for me, the way I viewed it was I saw the ex and the sibling did things that reminded me of, you see those in the movies where there'll be someone who takes a grenade and he sees this crowded, whether it's like a market or something, or a mall or whatever, even a stadium. And so they take this grenade and they throw it in there. And then the crowd is then running and so this person, the perpetrator, runs behind a wall, right? And so it just kind of sits there, stands there, and watches the people who are now so devastated that they're running around screaming and bleeding, while the perpetrator is standing there laughing. I mean, that's so pitiful and so disgusting. Where's the integrity? Where's the morality? Where are the ethics? Where's the sensibility? Where is the compassion for our children? Where is the compassion for other human beings? I mean, how can we possibly act this way? It's absolutely beyond one's sense of right and wrong, and one's sensibilities, really, and as is the things that we've witnessed within the courtrooms of our great country, where I and three of my children received $1,000, while my sister and one of my children received the whole inheritance. I mean, do you really think my parents would have set it up that way? I mean, I can assure you they didn't. And yet no one stopped them. And there weren't attorneys that were going to fight for me, and I could do nothing about that, because the documents were forged and they went before a judge, and the judge looked at the documents. They looked okay, right? And I was out of town, and they just rubber stamped them, and they just helped themselves. And so, when we think about this, and I think about my one son, not only did he have the fortune of the cash and the investments, but what about all the gold and the gems and the priceless art and the real estate at the base of the Acropolis, which was my mother's dowry, and 2 island properties? What was he going to do with all this? And so all of this just seemed to disappear into thin air, or somebody stole it, or the sibling took it, or I mean, what happened to all of this? It just vanished, So I don't think he had a clue, actually, of what was even in there. And there was no one that was going to tell him the actual amount of what he was entitled to per the documents, where it said that, where it had been written that he got it all, right? And so anyway, we'll dissect this a little bit more in number 24, where we see about the trickery and the deceit and the harassment, because that's affected human beings to their point of disconnection as to who they truly are as spiritual beings, on this planet, having a human experience. And so when we can kind of, actually remove ourselves from it and be the observer and see all of this stuff, it's pitiful, and yet it's almost humorous, because it's ridiculous. And yet we can, when we think about, okay, well, these are tests that we're going through, and it's how do we handle them? And so how do we handle them, really? Do we just allow it to go on and sit back, as I did for years? Because I was mortified. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is really going on. But in fact, no, it's not about that. It's really about saying, okay, that's enough. I know what's going on. I'm no longer affected by it in a way that I am so emotional. It's just that I see what's going on, and now we're going to make it right. And now we're going to talk about it, and we're going to negotiate, and we're going to act like responsible adults and figure out a way to get through this. Because right now our legal system isn't really doing what it needs to do in order to protect all of the citizens of this great country of ours. And so there are many gifts in all the experiences that we have, both as we see what's going on and then as we try to make things right, right? So it's a wild ride, I know. And so until next time, I thank you for being here, and I want you to know that I'm really proud of you, and I know that we can do this because we are so powerful, and we are here for a reason, and we are here to shed light on the darkness. And so with that note, I wish you a beautiful the rest of the day, and I love you. Bye.